Outgunned is a tabletop RPG by Two Little Mice, the creators of Broken Compass and Household, games that I have actually reviewed on this channel before. In those two previous games, you got to enter the world of Indiana Jones-like movie action, as well as a miniature fantasy kingdom inside of an abandoned but enchanted house. In Outgunned, it's back to the movies, this time action movies, circa 1980s and 1990s. In this video, I'm only going to be covering the quick start for the game, which is free to download. I don't have access to the full game because at the time of this recording, Outgunned is crowdfunding on Kickstarter. Links to the Kickstarter and the quick start are down below. I happen to have almost blind faith in what Two Little Mice puts out at this point because I was so gobsmacked by both Broken Compass and Household in terms of their overall design and presentation quality. It should be noted that even though I'm only paging through a short PDF here, their Kickstarters have always had a ton of physical rewards on offer. Really fancy books and supplements, maps, journals, all that stuff. But to be honest with you, I think the most important thing about any game is the game itself. In full disclosure, this is a sponsored video, but I'm going to be upfront about any worries I have about this game, as far as what I can see from the quick start. So what is Outgunned trying to do? Well, let's go straight to the inspiration section. This game is intended to recreate the look and feel of movies like Die Hard, True Lies, James Bond, Lethal Weapon, and Kingsman, to name a few. You play as the action heroes, and the GM is the director. I think the most important stipulation about the setting here is that it's supposed to be the 1980s or 90s, where you have cell phones and some form of internet, but no extremely modern technologies. This means things aren't going to be getting super technological like Jason Bourne or anything like that. So when you roll up your hero in this game, you make a few key choices. First, you pick from one of 10 rolls. Each of these gives you an attribute point and 10 skill points, as well as a choice of 2 feats. Then you choose a so-called trope, which will give you 1 more attribute point, 8 more skill points, and another feat. As far as skills, there are 20 listed across 5 attributes. Anytime you have a point in either a skill or an attribute, that is how many d6s you can add to a check. More on that in a minute. Feats are special little rules that either give you a free reroll or some other special action. Some of these mechanics are covered later, but a couple are only mentioned here once. One of them is adrenaline, which is a meta currency you can accumulate to spend on either a +1 on a roll, to activate certain feats, or to get a spotlight. And spotlights are not what you might think. In normal RPG parlance, spotlight refers to time that each player might get at the table, usually in the context of creating a fun, pro-social gaming environment where everyone gets enough time to shine during a session. In Outgunned, Spotlight is actually the name of a short list of meta abilities that you spend a huge amount of adrenaline on to enjoy. I think my favorite one is this last one, just do whatever you want, with the GM's approval of course. Gear in this game is fairly simplistic. If you have something in your inventory that can help towards a roll, then it either gives you a +1 to that roll, gives you an automatic success, which is an option that I really love by the way, because sometimes you really don't need to roll for actions that are boring and easy, or unlock the ability to even try for a roll. It's all pretty firmly commonsensical. As for weapons, they have an array of range bonuses or penalties that affect the roll when you use them at any given distance. Rides or vehicles are composed of really 2 stats, their speed rating, which is really their starting speed in a race, and their armor rating, or basically their health. If you're familiar with Broken Compass or Household, then the following dice mechanics are going to seem mighty familiar to you. Two Little Mice is doing what a lot of game publishers do, which is use their established rule set to publish a variety of games in different settings and with different themes, and add secondary mechanics to inform that setting and theme. In the case of the basic dice mechanic here, anytime you have to make a check, you choose any combination of attribute and skill that you think best applies to what your character is trying to do, and add up the rating for those scores. Then add or subtract from that score to account for adrenaline that you might be spending, conditions that you might be suffering from, gear that might be helping you, and whatever environmental or narrative elements that the GM says are in play. No matter what you add or subtract, you can never have fewer than 2d6 and more than 9d6 in a roll. Any given roll has a difficulty assigned to it, ranging from basic to impossible, and sometimes a challenge will require 2 successes to pass. The default in this game is a single critical difficulty for any given challenge. To actually succeed, you're just looking for duplicates on your roll. All that matters in almost every case is just getting more than 1 of a kind on a roll. 2 of a kind is a basic success, 3 of a kind is a critical success, all the way up to a jackpot, which is a 6 of a kind. Things get a little complex here. For example, what if you somehow rolled 3 two-of-a-kinds? Well, that's 3 basic successes, which are worth as much as a critical success. And it works the other way, where a higher level of success can be spent as 3 of a lower level of success. Before we dive deeper into that, I do want to point out that the reward you get for rolling a 6 of a kind is truly unique and a lot of fun. You get to be the GM or director for a turn. I love that. There's this pretty central concept to this game system where you can basically gamble and re-roll constantly. At the initial level on any given roll where you've gotten at least 1 basic success, you can re-roll all the non-successful dice in an attempt to upgrade your successes or score new successes. If you do, the scene plays out in your favor accordingly, but if you don't, you lose 1 of your previous successes. There are actually a number of feats that give you a free reroll where you don't risk losing successes and you don't even need an initial success to reroll, so you pretty much have to reroll anytime you have a feat like that because there's no risk for failure. The ultimate layer of gambling in the system is the all-in roll, where you can make a second reroll if the first reroll was successful. But if this second reroll fails, then you lose all your successes on the entire turn. Actually, there is yet another layer of gambling in these mechanics, this one literally called a gamble. And it's where you can announce before a roll that you want a +1 on your roll, but if you end up with any 1s or snake eye symbols, if you get the specialty dice, after all the rerolls are done, then you lose 1 grit for each one of those. This is the one place, at least in the quick start, where the symbol or number on the dice actually matters. And by the way, grit in this game is more or less your HP. More often than not, you're going to end up with an extra success here and there on a roll, and those can be spent on extra actions ranging from quick to full to cool actions. One thing I mentioned in my review of Household that I really like about the author's approach to failure in the system is how you're always meant to fail forward. Here on the right are 4 great ways to turn a failed roll into something interesting that keeps the story moving forward, as opposed to narrating that an attempted thing simply doesn't happen. Well, there are these examples on how to fail, as well as a more mechanically concrete kind of failure. There's a higher stakes subtype of roll in the game called dangerous rolls, and these are denoted in the book with a little skull icon. They are essentially identical to your normal rolls, except that when you fail, you lose 1 or more grit, depending on the difficulty set for the roll. So what exactly is grit anyway? It's this row of 12 boxes on your character sheet that track what is essentially hit points. You lose grit from dangerous rolls, as well as failing resistance rolls in combat, and maybe some other ways as well. You can actually mitigate the amount of grit you lose by spending successes that show up on an otherwise failed roll. In that way, no 2s or 3s of a kind in a roll are wasted, even if it was an overall failed roll. As your grit boxes fill up, they hit 2 milestones. One is the bad box, and this is where your character picks up a condition that the GM will decide for you. The last box is the hot box, where you get 2 adrenaline to spend however you wish. In the turn where you pick up more grit than you have boxes for, then you've officially lost your grit and need to roll a d6 against your current death roulette score. If you roll over your death roulette score, then you get to keep playing and you just lower your roulette score by 1. If you happen to roll at or under your current death roulette score, then you are, quote, left for dead, where a teammate can either save you or you bow out of the adventure. The most notable thing here is the fact that you recover all of your grit at the end of a scene or anywhere you can catch a breather, which means this whole mechanic is based on scenes and implies that the GM might as well get completely brutal in any given scene because grit boxes are meant to be filled up fast and flushed pretty frequently. You may actually want to just use a D12 at your table to denote your grit level since it might change so frequently. As far as actual combat in this game, it's pretty simple. If it's your turn, you can make a quick action and an action roll. To attack an enemy, you have to make a roll equal to the enemy defense rating. For every success at that level, the enemy loses 1 grit. When you're being attacked, you roll a reaction roll. The goal is to roll at least 1 success type equal to the enemy attack rating. Any extra successes on this reaction roll mean that you can strike back and land even more damage on the enemy. As simple as these rules are, there are some actual mechanics to affect attack range and cover, and all the edge cases will be covered in the full rulebook. One thing I found kind of weird was right here. So ammo is not tracked. It's one of those games where you just have to reload in some instances, and you happen to never run out of magazines. But here's the weird thing. If you fail a shoot roll, you have to reload. This doesn't make much sense to me, since a missed shot doesn't necessarily expend an entire magazine of ammo. The only way to reconcile this is that a failed shoot roll means your character emptied an entire mag willy-nilly and didn't hit anything. Just strange. Enemies themselves are broken down into essentially 3 things. There are grit boxes, which by the way have those milestone boxes, aka hot boxes, that can trigger certain special abilities or other things, an attack success rating and a defense success rating, which was mentioned a minute ago. Vehicle chases are designed in a pretty interesting way in this game. When a chase starts, the GM decides on the need rating for the chase itself. The idea is that the players need to fill the need boxes in order to win the chase. Then each vehicle starts with a speed rating, which will change in the course of the chase. This ranges from 1 to 3. At the end of each turn, the player's vehicle's ending speed rating is how many need points are ticked off towards victory. On each round of the chase, players come up with any kind of creative way to increase their speed, and for every critical success rolled, the vehicle speed will rise by 1, and for every failed roll, it will decrease by 1. Then when it's the GM's turn, the player will roll reaction rolls in response to whatever the bad guys are doing. If the PC driving the vehicle fails this roll, the vehicle itself will lose 1 armor point. All other players in the vehicle who fail the reaction roll lose 1 grit. Any failed rolls in this phase reduces the vehicle's speed by 1. Once a vehicle's armor hits 0 in this fashion, the vehicle will explode, and all heroes lose 6 grit each. Here's the most interesting part to me. It says here that after the 4th turn of a chase, if the heroes have neither won nor lost, the director raises the stakes. Essentially, it becomes an almost sudden death round. I really like this approach because it recognizes that after about 4 rounds, a chase can get a bit stale. So it's nice to have a little rule that tries to wrap things up. It says down here that the full rulebook will cover aquatic, flying, and armored vehicles as well. Here's a concept that I wish I saw in every game, a GM control panel sheet. In the case of Outgunned, it's called a mission sheet, and it helps the director track top-level details in an ongoing adventure. Here there are these huge once-per-campaign meta abilities called Plan B, where players can call in a crazy Deus Ex Machina to save them in a scene. This quickstart also comes with a sample one-shot that I won't detail in this video as to avoid spoilers, but it comes with 4 pre-gens, so you can hit the table with it pretty fast and see how this game plays at your table. So here are my thoughts so far on Outgunned. There is a lot not yet revealed. As much as you get the gist of this game from this quickstart, there is a lot of tantalizing teasing. Things like the list of feats and tropes for your character, full list of weapons, vehicle rules, and additional combat mechanics. I can't really call this video a review since we're really not seeing the full picture here. Fictional oddities. I know this is a game about outsized, larger-than-life cinematic action heroes, so talking about realism is kind of absurd, but that one thing about needing to reload after a failed shooting roll was a little weird to me. And one other thing that jumped out at me was how much grit a default enemy goon has. In movies, your typical goon just takes 1 bullet to go down, but here, cannon fodder is given a whopping 9 boxes. This is easy enough to fix though. Thrill of the gamble. The 2 Little Mice rule set is so rife with gambling and I love it. Every roll has a built-in re-roll mechanic, and then you can go all in with a second reroll. And even the death mechanic of rolling against your death roulette rating feels like a gamble, although that's more thematic than an actual wager of any sort. But there is a literal gamble where you can ask for a +1 on a roll, but risk losing grit if you end up with any 1s left over. These mechanics just add a lot of fun and levity to the game. Fast and furious grit. I appreciate the speed at which grit is replaced and replenished. That is a crucial element to the pace of this game, where you're pretty much never messing around with hospital visits and medical attention, just like in action movies. In those movies, the hero is always fully recovered for the next scene, no matter how much damage they sustain. The grit recovery here is perfect. Presentation quality. I think Two Little Mice has firmly established themselves at this point in the RPG space as consummate professionals in terms of their ability to put together maximum quality layouts and as far as their artwork, which is always just fantastic and evocative every time. So yeah, overall, Outgunned looks like a kind of perfectly engineered action movie RPG that delivers on all the tropes of that cinematic genre, injecting fun gamification of combat and vehicle chases and cutting out anything that might be boring or out of place. But this was just the quick start. The devil is in the details and how this actually plays at the table. If you want to get your hands on this game for yourself and to see what is actually fully on offer with the Kickstarter, you'll have to click on the link below to find out. And if you've actually run the one-shot included in this quick start already, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this game down below in the comments. Thanks as always for watching. See ya.